So, Jai Shriman Narayan, we are now recording, I believe. Let me check. It is recording, very good. So, we are going to talk today about the gunas.
Yes, Mataji, and Jai Shriman, thank you. My obeisances to you. And what I wanted to discuss, Mataji, is that neophytes, we hear a lot about the gunas. It's one of the first things we sort of read or come across when we delve into the Bhagavad Gita with any detail.
Definitely.
There's also and there's all sorts of confusion or misconceptions about the gunas, and I think people sometimes go as far as to weaponize the gunas, Mataji. They say you're tamasic, you're rajasic, I'm sattvic. And so there's all sorts of misconceptions about sattva, rajas, and tamas. And then what I'd like to do, Mataji, is that I also understand, and correct me if wrong, is that sattva, rajas, and tamas is also a natural state within cycles, like within a 24-hour day. I've heard that the morning is sattvic, later on in the day it's more rajasic, and later on it's tamasic. So how does that relate to the three gunas? So what I'd like to understand really from you before is what are the three gunas? Where do they come from? What does it mean, both in terms of the world around us and we as people? And I think that would be an initial start before we delve into the nature of tapasya. So that would be really good, Mataji, if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure, definitely. Actually, the science of gunas is extremely important, and Krishna in Bhagavad Gita starts talking specifically about the gunas in chapter 14, which is totally dedicated to the study of the gunas. And the discussion about the gunas continues also in chapter especially 16 and 17 and 18. In chapter 16, the importance of the gunas is connected to the basic distinction between the divine deva, the nature of devas, and the nature of asuras. And chapter 17, it applies the science of the gunas to religion, the various components of religions in which also the austerities are mentioned. So there are austerities in tamas, in rajas, and in sattva. And finally, the last chapter of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, summarizes how the gunas are actually everywhere in the material world, but they only refer to the material world. So the swadharma of different people in human society, specifically the varnas, are determined by the guna and karma, but especially on the gunas, because karma is something that also depends on guna. So, as you see, also Krishna says that from in this world, from the lowest planet to the highest planet, including the devas, everything is subject to the three gunas of material nature. So you see, it's very important. Now, in order to weaponize the gunas, as you said, it's not it's not exactly, you cannot really weaponize the gunas, but people can, if they don't have sufficient knowledge and understanding, they tend to identify the nature of any specific person according to a particular influence of the gunas. But this is a problem because the gunas constantly change. So while we
very interesting, very interesting on a number of points. The first is the gunas constantly change. But Mataji, can you ask, before we talk about that, could you please explain to me and your audience what's the relationship with the gunas to Prakriti or to Mahamaya, if you would?
Yeah. Oh, the Daivi Esha Gunamai Mamamaya Duratyaya. The three gunas are the components of the manifestation that is created by Mahamaya. Mahamaya is the energy of manifestation, the Shakti of manifestation of the material world. So the gunas are the first manifestation of the material world. The interaction of the three gunas is the basis for the manifestation of the material elements. So the Akash is Sattva. Then we have the air that is Sattva and Rajas, and so on. So we come to the point of the earth, which is the most dense element, which is associated with tamas, because the earth is jada, means inert. You see stones. Stones are they're called jada in the sense that they're inert. Tell.
That's very interesting, Mataji, because, again, I'm embarrassed to say that I had this view that, don't laugh when you hear this, but Sattvic is really good, Tamas is really bad, and really, really bad, and Rajas is a bit of both, and that's the view that I had. And what you're saying here is that, well, it's not quite as simple as that. Is that right, Mataji?
Exactly. We need all the three gunas. We should establish ourselves in the sattva gunas. Nitya sattva sto, says Krishna in Gita. But our body will always carry, our physical body will always carry a certain amount of tamas. That's why we need to sleep. Because it is made by all the elements. Our consciousness should be focused on sattva and possibly on Shuddha sattva. But
now it's clear.
Yeah.
Now it's clear. What you're saying is you're differentiating between consciousness, focusing on what is sattvic.
Yeah.
But you're saying that the material body has no choice but to have all three gunas simply because it's material by default, basically.
Yeah, we can improve the situation, by our choices. Like, for example, even our material body can become a little more sattvic. For example, if we wash it regularly, if we feed sattvic food to it, so it becomes more sattvic. While if we eat, tamasic food or bad food or whatever, and if we don't observe basic hygiene, the body will become more tamasic. But
perfect sense, Mataji.
Yeah.
Perfect sense.
But the three gunas are not to be condemned, or what to say. They don't have an absolute value in themselves. They're just component of the material world. It's just like saying, water is good and sand is bad. That makes no sense. Of course, you cannot drink sand, but you should drink water, and if water is clear and pure, it's better. But
So
Mataji,
you're describing what is very clear now, because people say, oh, Mr. Smith, he's very sattvic, or Mr. Jones is very tamasic in nature.
Yeah.
Does that apply in Mataji or not?
Well, that applies in the sense that Mr. Smith is behaving by associating with the Sattva guna more. He's choosing, he's establishing himself more in contact, more engaged in the Sattva guna, in the sense that Mr. Smith probably, is pure vegetarian, and he's nice and gentle and quiet and peaceful and intelligent. All these are the qualities of Sattva. But it's not that Mr. Smith is ontologically a sattvic person, because if Mr. Jones, makes an effort to engage in sattva, like, he becomes vegetarian, for example, so his contact with the gunas, his engagement in the gunas changes. Guna and karma are something that always constantly changes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
This is very important. Yeah, guna and karma are the very foundation of the material manifestation, material universe. So karma means action, and guna means quality. Quality expands to the qualities of our behavior, the qualities of our material consciousness, because our spiritual consciousness goes beyond the gunas. That's why it's called transcendental. What is the meaning of transcendental? Transcendental means to transcend, to go beyond. So, when we are established in a transcendental consciousness, we have gone beyond the guna and karma. This is important to understand. So we cannot, attribute a permanent quality in connection with the material gunas to any person, because that person is actually Atman, which is beyond gunas and karma. Now,
absolutely. So when you said that gunas are constantly changing, or gunas are changing, are you talking about the person and their material attributes? Is that here?
Okay, yes. Let's make an example. Okay. Now, it is mentioned that sattva is cleanliness, right? Peacefulness, cleanliness,
Yes.
That is sattvic. Now, if we don't engage this peacefulness and cleanliness in the proper actions through rajas, engage in rajas to support sattva, then from sattva we will slide into tamas, because if we think we are clean, if we like the fact that we are clean, we'll not do the cleanup of the house, because when we clean up the house, we get a little dust, our hands get maybe, a little dirty. So we don't like to do the cleaning. And guess what's happening? What's going to happen?
Yes, the house will get very dirty.
Yeah.
And we'll get dirty as well.
Yeah, but because we are still convinced we are in sattva, we are clean. So we never need to take a bath. So, and we are so peaceful, so detached, that we become lazy and we, end up sleeping all the time. And that is tamas. You cannot...
That makes complete sense.
Yeah. We cannot establish ourselves in Nitya Sattva if we don't transcend the gunas, because nitya sattva means shuddha sattva. Because the material sattva guna is not stable. It's not permanent.
So therefore, can you please outline, do you transcend the gunas by working in detachment, doing one's svadharma? Is that how transcending the gunas occurs? You know, how does that happen?
The basic requirement to transcend the gunas is to realize that we are not the body, we are not the mind, we are not anything material, that we are the Atman, we are transcendence, Atman Brahman. That automatically puts us beyond the gunas. Of course, we are not the body and the mind, but we have a body and a mind. So we are beyond the gunas, but our body and mind are not.
Correct, Mataji.
So,
absolutely.
Now, when we keep identifying, like Krishna is explaining in Gita, you know, that the person who is established in a transcendental realization in the nitya sattva, shuddha sattva, is always aware of his actual nature of Atman Brahman, even when the body does all the activities. Like Krishna is saying, he opens and closes the eyes, accepts, rejects, you know, whatever activities, walks, eats, sleeps, you know. But the person, the Atman, is always aware of the transcendental existence, and he sees that it is the body and the mind that are engaging in the gunas. And Krishna even says that the gunas must be engaged in the gunas. Guna, guneshu vartante. We need to engage the gunas in the gunas. So, it's not that we have to totally abolish rajas and tamas, because, you know, just like we cannot abolish the water from our body, it's not possible. You know, so from our body and mind, we need to use the gunas, to engage the gunas in the proper way, guided by sattva. So the three gunas are, the sattva is the driver, the rajas is the horse, and the tamas is the cart, the chariot. The chariot is heavy, and I've
never heard that. I've never heard that before, and that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
How you see that.
Yeah. You know, so the chariot is heavy and will not move by itself. You know, and so is tamas. Tamas is heavy, and you know, if you let yourself be dragged by tamas, you go down. The rajas is like the horse; it has the power to, you know, pull the chariot. But you have to control the horse. You have to engage the horse. Because if you let the horse do whatever he likes, yeah, that's going to be dangerous. And that's why, yeah, so the conscious, also if we want to make another parallel, the tamas is the body, the rajas is the mind, and the sattva is the consciousness, the intelligence. So the consciousness needs to control the mind and use the mind in meditation to engage the body in karma yoga, to engage, you know, to pull the body around and engage it into doing stuff, because the chariot is also useful.
Yes. So Mataji, what you're saying here is that in reality, we should not resist sattva, tamas, and rajas in isolation.
We cannot.
Driving.
We cannot.
But the driver in our action, what is driving our consciousness, what is behind our consciousness, should be sattvic things.
Yeah.
But in reality, sattva. But in reality, our everyday actions contains the three gunas by default, Mataji, basically.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Because, how can you do anything without the mind? How can you do anything without the body? You can do, if your mind is very strong and very well developed, you can do without the body. But still, if you have the material body, you need to use it properly. It's not that you can just give it up. So, and the same is for the gunas. Everything in this world can be used in the sattvic consciousness. Even if it is just by rejecting it. For example, tamasic food, yeah, you can reject it, but you're still dealing with it. It's not that it will disappear. It will never exist. Because it will continue to exist. This is the world. And, this is a material world. Sattva, Rajas, Tamas are everywhere. From the highest planets to the lowest planets.
Do you know, what you've just said now brings us very nicely to the subject of, because what you've said is really important. You cannot avoid it. So this is something that is really important. Before we get on to that, Mataji, are there any other practical aspects to the gunas that you feel we haven't covered, or that...
Oh, of course. We are going through the Gita now. And we say, Bhagavan said, I will tell you again about the supreme knowledge among all sciences. Okay. And he said, those who take shelter in this knowledge attain my same position. Wow. And they are not going to take birth in the next creation. They will also remain firmly established even at the time of the dissolution. O descendant of Bharata, the Mahatattva is my matrix, Mama Yonir, in which I create the embryo of creation from which all beings and situations subsequently manifest. So, verse 5, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. These are the gunas manifested by the Prakriti. O mighty armed Arjuna, these gunas bind the eternal soul to the body. Among these, the contact with sattva through association binds to purity, illumination, freedom from defects, happiness and knowledge. But it is still a bondage, right? So, you should know that the contact with rajas develops attachment and hankering that bind the embodied beings to action. Because with just sattva, you not do anything. Purity, illumination, freedom from defect, happiness and knowledge, you're just sitting there, not doing anything. So,
yes.
So with rajas, what you do, attachment and hankering, means you have desires, you want to do something. That is the mind. The mind always wants something. But instead of rejecting rajas, we need to engage rajas into the action that is the swadharma, and it is karma yoga. It is conducive to our personal development and to the sustenance of the whole universe, for the benefit of all beings. How many times Krishna says that one has to work for the benefit of all beings. And this is the action. The point is, if we identify with the gunas, then we will be bound by them. So if we don't identify with sattva, but we use sattva to understand what actions should be done and what actions should not be done, we are not identifying with sattva. we are using sattva to guide the mind, the rajas. Now,
So Mataji, we hear of this Suddha Sattva.
Yeah.
Is that a guna or is that something else?
No, Suddha Sattva is beyond the gunas. Is when the sattva is not a bond anymore. It's not, you're not bound by sattva anymore because it's pure. It's pure means free from identifications and attachments. When you identify with sattva and you are attached to sattva, then, as we said before, this is a bondage that is going to bring to degradation because you're sliding to tamas.
So Mataji, is Suddha Sattva someone who is Atman realized but still in a material body? Is that what Suddha Sattva means, basically, Mataji?
Yes. When we are establishing Suddha Sattva, we are in transcendence. Suddha means pure. Pure means free from material conditionings and contaminations, which includes sattva, the material sattva. So we are not bonded. We are not tied up by sattva, because our sattva is transcendental. So we are using sattva, but not being used by sattva. It's more difficult if we identify and we are attached to rajas, and even more difficult if we identify and are attached to tamas, because tamas needs rajas to get out of the bog. And rajas need sattva to understand what action we need to perform and what actions we need to avoid performing. By tamas, when we are immersed in tamas, identifying with tamas, attached to tamas, we cannot get out. We cannot become transcendental. Because we are stupid. So it's the consciousness, it's what our consciousness identifies with that is the key, as opposed to, Mr. Smith is tamasic. What you're saying is Mr. Smith's consciousness identifies with tamasic things. It wasn't Mr. Jones before.
Sorry, I forgot about that.
Okay.
Well, you know what I mean. Yeah,
I know. But, we don't want to confuse people. So...
No, that's easily done nowadays. But yes, absolutely. So what you mean that is when we say that Mr. X is tamasic, we say that what we should be thinking is Mr. X's consciousness is immersed in tamasic.
Is attached to tamas. Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Jones is attached to tamas. He is convinced, he has, he's immersed in tamas. He's not tamasic. It's like, the Atman is like a diamond that is covered by so many layers of mud and dirt. The diamond never becomes dirt. If the diamond identifies as dirt, it's very difficult to become purified and clear and do its actual function as a diamond. That's why we need to become purified. We need to purify our consciousness and get out of tamas by engaging rajas. And we engage rajas with intelligence through sattva. When we are on the level of sattva, we need the courage and the understanding to go even beyond sattva, to the Shuddha Sattva. We become totally purified from all material identifications and attachments, and that's called Shuddha Sattva or Nitya Sattva, because it doesn't change, because the Atman doesn't change. What is changing is the material nature. The material elements, our body and mind, they're always changing. And so the gunas are always changing. If we overcome, we go beyond the identification with our body and mind, we go beyond the material gunas, which is, natural for us as Atman. It's our real identity, our real nature. Is that clear?
Yes, this is now very clear, and the diamond analogy really did help. So I think that is very, very clear, and it brings us nicely to, if you're happy to now talk about our second part, which is based on tapasya. And
we'll go a little bit, little bit about these verses here.
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah, the tamas causes ignorance and binding results such as confusion, madness, laziness, and excessive sleep. Now, you remember we were saying what happens to the material sattva when...
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Then we have this sattva binds to happiness, rajas to activities, and tamas transforms into madness. So, the doors of the body, rajas, tendency to greed. Okay.
Do you know what? It's really fascinating, Mataji, because you've mentioned sleep and laziness. Well, we have to sleep. Our bodies have to sleep at night time.
Exactly.
So that you can't get away from tamas in the material sense.
You cannot get away, but you can regulate it.
Yes.
Correct, by activities and by choices, means by rajas and sattva. And you can also use tamas, you can use sleep to regenerate, and you can detach your subconscious mind from the body, so you can go astral traveling, you can have lucid dreams, you can go out of body, which is not tamasic. It's the material body that needs to sleep. The mind is resting in different ways.
Absolutely, that makes complete sense, Matthew.
Okay, that's good. So, let's go on to the chapter, to the chapter of, so Krishna is saying, one who truly serves me in Bhakti Yoga without deviating develops desires on the Brahman level, transcending all these gunas. So we have chapter 15, 16, and let's go to 17. This is 16. That is the difference between, here. These are the divine qualities, the qualities of the devas. Fearlessness, purification of one's existence, constant application of knowledge, generosity, control of one's senses, engage in sacred activities, study of Atmavidya. All this is sattva. Right? So the deva nature is sattva. And the characteristic of the asuras are the opposite, rajas and tamas. Hypocrisy, impudence, conceit, rage, rudeness, ignorance. So, you see how it works. Okay.
Yes.
And then it goes on and here. And the chapter 17, the Shraddha Traya Vibhaga Yoga, is the three types of Shraddha, of faith. So we have here, embodied beings, verse 2, can develop faith of three types according to their nature, either in sattva, rajas, and tamas. Okay. Those who are sattvic worship the personalities of God, Devan, which also includes the devas. Those who are in rajas worship the rakshasas and the yakshas, because these are mostly rajas. And those who are in tamas offer sacrifices to ghosts and other types of lower beings. Here, Those who do not follow the directions of the Shastra submit themselves to terrible practices out of egotism and false religiousness, means rajas and tamas, and engage in such activities compelled by the force of lust and attachment. So we need to follow the Shastra, because the Shastras are giving us the recommendations to remain in sattva and to use rajas mostly to get out of tamas. Now, you should know that there are certainly asuras, those who don't follow the Shastra. Food is categorized into 3 types, which are, and all, as are all the things desired by people, the ritual sacrifices, austerities, and charity. So the food we know, what is, sattva, rajas, tamas. The yagya that is performed without aspiring to obtain selfish results, but is directed by proper knowledge, out of sense of duty, and with full concentration of the mind, is in sattva. The ritual sacrifices that are performed out of self-righteousness or to get selfish materialistic results are classified under rajas. The religious rituals that are performed without knowledge, without chanting the proper mantras, without faith, without the sanctification of food, or without offering gifts, must be considered as belonging to tamas. And we come to the tapas. Tapa uchate. Deva dvija guru pragya, pujanam sauchamarjavam, brahmacharyam ahimsam cha, shariram tapa uchate. The austerities of the body. Now here Krishna is going to explain the austerities, the tapas of the body and the mind, the word and the mind. Okay, so it is said that the austerities of the body are the worship offered to God, to the twice born, to the teacher, to the wise and knowledgeable, as well as cleanliness, simplicity, functioning on the transcendental level, which is brahmacharyam. It's not just abstaining from sexual relationship. The Brahma Achara means behaving like Brahman. And abstaining from hatred. Ahimsa is not simply non-violence, means abstaining from hatred. Okay. Then it is said that the austerities of speech are the practice of sadhana and the study of Atma Vidya, and speaking in a truthful but pleasing and peaceful manner. It is said that the austerities of the mind are the purification of one's emotions and nature, self-control, kindness, serenity, and the ability to remain in silence. Now, I think that your idea of tapasya was probably, the austerity in the sense of renouncing the body, mortification of the body, renouncing all sense gratification.
Yes, Mataji, and I remember, please don't laugh when you sort of hear my sort of preconceptions, but there is this viewpoint. There is this viewpoint that what does tapasya mean?
Yeah.
It means starving oneself.
Yeah.
Or it means, you get these ideas of like.
This idea of tapasya means starving oneself comes basically from the Abrahamic and especially Christian perception. Because the Christian perception is still carrying the Manichaean Zoroastrian idea that the material world is bad, material nature is bad.
Yes,
the body is bad.
So what people like myself believed was that tapasya is basically give something up, undergo loads of hardship, whether it's starving yourself or whether it's going off
torturing yourself. Well, that's what Krishna just said before. The people who don't follow the Shastra and they go by fantasy, they engage in horrible austerities, torturing the body and the mind. And Krishna says this is asuric, because when they torture the body and the mind, they're trying to make God suffer as well, because God is also in their body.
So that's really interesting, that last bit. So with that, Mataji, what is tapasya, and more importantly, what is the definition? And secondly, does the average person with a job and everything in the world today, how do we incorporate tapasya into our sadhana, basically? I'd love to hear that from you.
Yeah, okay. Now, tapasya, tapas literally means intensity. It's the intensity that produces heat, that cooks. It's like when you have, let's take a laser, for example. If you intensify a ray of light and you obtain a laser beam, that laser beam is burning. It's very hot because it's very intense. Now, tapas is not necessarily spiritual. It's just intensity. We can engage, we can apply this intensity to anything. Like the great asuras of the past, like, Hiranyakashipu, engage this tapas, this intensity, to the fulfillment of his intentions. And Dhruva as well. You remember the story of Dhruva from the Bhagavad Purana?
Yes.
So he was so intensely focused on, attaining Vishnu and meditating on Vishnu. He was so focused that, he naturally gave up eating and drinking and even breathing at some point.
So what you're saying, Mataji, what you're saying here is tapasya denotes intensity.
Yes.
As opposed to, it's the feeling, it's that intensity that denotes tapasya, as opposed, it doesn't necessarily have to be connected to any endpoint. It's the intensity that, because Hiranyakashipu didn't, whilst he was performing lots of austerities intensely, it wasn't necessarily geared towards the right end, was it, Mataji?
Of course not, his intensity was directed to the idea of becoming immortal.
Yes.
So, tapas is simply the intensity of our focus, of our concentration, of our effort.
And that can have a good endpoint or a bad endpoint.
Like intelligence. Intelligence is, it's a very high quality, a very high element, and intelligence actually can take you to the spiritual realization. But if you employ your intelligence for, evil purposes, you're not getting, dharmic purposes. You're just applying it in the wrong way, but you get the result anyway.
Yes, and this is very important. So, with that in mind, Mataji, now that bit's clear, because people automatically link tapasya to sort of godly
spiritual life, divine, spiritual.
Yes. Whereas what we have to be clear is it's mainly the intensity of an action that's important. I mean, it's just
what we just saw before, that Krishna is saying there are three types of faith, and the faith of the asuras is not spiritual, but it's faith.
No. And we know, Mataji, that the people that are the parasite class in the world today are pretty devoted to doing bad things, and will do it with great intensity. So you could argue that's a form of tapasya, like Hiranyakashipu.
Oh, definitely. And they even boast of performing religious activities. We have just skipped the chapter 16 when Krishna explains that the asuras, they say, oh, I am performing a lot of religious rituals, I'm doing yagyas, I'm doing charity, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. But they are asuras.
Exactly. So, Mataji, now that you've cleared up, the biggest thing you've cleared up is what actually is tapasya, because I automatically linked it to, number one, extreme hardship, and number two, I linked it to a good spiritual endpoint, whereas I think you've cleared that very sort of nicely. You've cleared that up very nicely. My next point, Mataji, is what does it mean to link tapasya into our sadhana in daily life, Mataji? That's my point to you. What are the things we could do? What are the things, or does it mean just doing what you do with a passion and intensity aimed towards Atman realization? I'd love to hear that from you, Mataji.
Actually, when Krishna is speaking about sadhana, he's also saying susukam kartum avyayam. It means that our tapasya should be comfortable enough to be permanent, to be consistent. Susukam kartum avyayam. Susukam means pleasant. And avyayam means constant, not temporary. Always permanent. So now the problem with people doing tapasya is that they cannot go on for a long time. If the tapasya is not done with intelligence, with in a sattvic manner, because they'll freak out. The body and mind are not ready. And then, if we reject the body and mind, we are actually feeding the ego only. We should, like Krishna is saying here, the austerities of the body are the worship offered to God, to the twice born, to the teacher, to the wise and knowledgeable, as well as cleanliness, simplicity, functioning on the transcendental level, and abstaining from hatred. It doesn't say giving up sense gratification. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say renouncing the comfort of the body, of the mind. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say starving. It doesn't say fasting. What does it say? What are the actual austerities of the body? So, we need to be serious about our journey, our work on the spiritual level, which is not, sadhana, many people have also confused, ideas about, misconceptions about what sadhana means. Sadhana means constant practice, regulated practice. Now, one good thing that the Ramanuja followers are doing, the Ramanandi followers are doing, they apply vairagya individually as per time, place, and person. They are very personalistic. They decide, each student decides together, under the guidance of the guru, which austerities they will perform, according to the time, place, and situation, and circumstance. So some people may, like for example, decide they want to get up early in the morning before the sunrise and go through the purification and, sit for meditation and, all the japa and everything. And that's their sadhana. Other people may do even more by, or whatever, different type that you can also combine them. Like another thing is the food intake. One practice of tapasya could be you're not going to eat until you finish all your morning meditations and pujas and everything. So that's a sort of fasting. And sometimes in the festivals, these prayers, meditations, and pujas and stuff can go on for several hours. So maybe you skip the breakfast and you eat only for lunch or for dinner. But then again, there are different approaches. Like, for example, eating a meal is considered something more official, like cooking. While if you eat some fruits and milk, you're not cooking, so you're not eating, basically. So that's a type of fasting.
Is that the basis of Ekadashi, Mataji, as well, basically, from that side?
Ekadashi, yeah. So, it's a basis of all the fastings. So, you might have seen that, especially in the Indian tradition, there are very different approaches to fasting. Sometimes I was very surprised when I was in India, when internet came. Then after some time also the websites, Indian websites came up, and I was looking, I found websites, blog pages with recipes for fasting. I was thinking, what? Well, your fasting means you don't eat, right? So what are you talking about recipes? And then I was going and I said, wow, that's not exactly fasting. Also, Bhaktivedanta Swami, he had Ekadashi feasts. Just you abstain from grains. And if you, like for example, you can have lots of fruits and most vegetables and nuts and some even flour made from non-grains, such as shingara flowers, that is flour from water chestnuts, flour made from banana. You can make so many things. And in fact, in the 70s. In 1970s, the Ekadashi was, in fact, the food, the prasadam in Ekadashi was even better than the regular days food.
So, Mataji, you've talked about food, you've talked about fasting, but can tapasya also involve something as simple as I will read a chapter of the Bhagavad Gita every night before I go to bed?
Definitely.
Can it include some form of ritual like that, where we say, well,
definitely.
What I will do every night?
But the tapasya is not the sadhana. Tapasya is the effort that you put in the sadhana. Reading a chapter of Bhagavad Gita every night is a sadhana, and the tapasya is the fact that you're putting sufficient effort to keep it going.
Yes, now it's very clear. So people think that tapasya automatically equates to hardship.
No.
That's a general perception.
No. It involves hardship in the sense that when, like for example, you're working at some important project that you are really focused on, and you forget about eating. You know, my mother, when I was a small child, my mother was, very, very amused and annoyed because I when she was calling me for meals, I was annoyed. I said, why? Always eating. We cannot concentrate on anything here. There's always something else, So that means if you are actually concentrated and focused on something, naturally you'll forget about eating. It's not that you're not eating so that you punish your body.
Absolutely, Mataji. And this makes complete sense now. You clarified a lot of things. You clarified that tapasya is the intensity. And for instance, it doesn't have to be punishment. It's mainly the intensity of the action. And it's not always connected with good things.
No, not necessarily.
On the end points as well.
It should.
Yes.
Should.
Yes. But it can be connected to negative things. Obviously, in the case of things like Kirana.
Yeah, depends on how we use it. Yeah.
And again, Mataji, that's been really important because this was a big misconception that we had because people equate tapasya to a yogi sitting there.
Yeah, with the people. This so-called sadhus who are holding up a hand until it
yes, that's right. This is the common perception.
Goes bad.
You have that he's got a wasted hand that has been elevated for.
But that
decades.
Krishna just said that this is asuric behavior. You remember, this ashastra. That is not prescribed here. It's not prescribed in the Shastra. That means, here it is.
But Mataji, but Mataji, and again, this is a common perception many of us have, that you see these pictures in India of you go to a remote place, a camera will be taken to a remote place, in the snow, and all of a sudden out in the snow you'll find a sadhu literally walking with barely any clothes, and
okay, that's one demonstration that they have overcome the needs of the body, but that's not the real tapasya. That's a demonstration. Why, the good ones do that to show people that we're not the body.
Yes, and the good ones hide from the camera. You never see.
Exactly, they don't do it on, for the cameras because. They just do it for the serious people. They're not entertainers.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to clarify that example because I'm sure a lot of people will have that in the back of their mind that, is this tapasya? They'll equate this, they'll make this synonymous with tapasya in the back of their mind, so to speak, Mataji.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Here we have, again, Trividya Bhavati. Okay. Sattvam, Sattvika. Ashastra, here, verse 7. Ashastra vihitam ghoram, tapyanta yeta pojana. Dambhahankara samyukta, kamaraga, balambita. Those people who do not follow the directions of the Shastra submit themselves to terrible practices, like what we said before, out of egotism and false religiousness, and engage in such activities compelled by the force of lust and attachment. You should know that they are certainly asuras, because they foolishly cause suffering and damage to all beings, and to me as well, since I reside within the body.
Perfect. highlights exactly what he said before, that you're actually hurting Krishna. Well, not that anyone can hurt God, of course.
No, but
in the sense that your intention
you're
isn't
hurting
good.
consciousness. You're trying to damage consciousness, and your body and mind are not meant to, create suffering. They're meant to create transcendental knowledge and consciousness. So if you choose suffering, you're an asura. So that's why Christianity is basically an asuric religion.
So I've got one final question in this discussion on Tapasya, Mataji, and this is this, and it's based on your purport on the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
So Mataji, most people have this view of Hinduism as just being full of quote-unquote retreats. And where, what am I doing? I'm being spiritual. I'm being spiritual this week by going off to a retreat.
But that's copied from the Christians.
Well, absolutely. I'm going to get to this because the reason for this is, on the one hand, you have this typical, it's this typical viewpoint in modernity that I'm being spiritual, I'm going off to do yoga in a retreat and eating all these clean foods, and I'm having soap massages and all sorts of other things, Ayurveda thrown in there for good measure. And
but that's not spiritual.
Yeah, I know, but what I'm saying, Mataji, is that they have this viewpoint, and then on the other hand, the Bhagavad Gita was spoken on a battlefield when things were not good, and the problem, Mataji, is that in modernity, most people, especially in 2026, 2025, 26, when the world isn't a nice place, so they struggle to reconcile their definition of spirituality as being yogic retreats, quote unquote, versus the real world, which is madness. So my question, Mataji, is to you, is that there's a problem here. There's a bit of paradox going on between these two states. How do we link? Is our path simply, and you've spoken about this in the Bhagavad Gita in your purport, how do we link yogic retreats? Is there a place for these things, or is this just high commercialism, Mataji? Does it belong in our
It depends on what the retreat is, because if you go on a retreat in which you focus your consciousness, your attention to the study of the Shastra, to the meditation and clearing your mind and trying to understand the purpose of life, that is what we do and we call vrata. Ekadashi vrata. We are supposed to stop the usual things we do, our job, and just focus on the spiritual consciousness. That's why, I found when I went to India, I found that the word for fasting is upavas. Upavas literally means staying near God, staying near the deities, the temple, the Shastra, the consciousness, staying near the consciousness of Atman Brahman, Bhagavan Paramatma. Because when you fast, it's not that you fast because you want to suffer or you want to starve and punish your body. You don't have to do a lot of work that is usually connected with preparing and eating the food and everything. So you can eat, of course you can eat some fruit, something you don't need to cook, something you don't need to, put a lot of work into. And you're eating light food, so you're not completely...
That connects the dots.
Yeah.
That connects the dots, because you don't need the time you spend worrying about food and cooking and stuff. You don't have to do that. So that time is then focused on more...
and that's the meaning of the pasa, intensity, focus.
Correct. Now I understand. That connects those dots. And therefore, Mataji, the whole point of a retreat is something that you can, like a 3-day retreat is going to be useless if for the remainder of the time you don't make use of the knowledge.
Okay, it's not going to be useless.
And apply that.
It's going to be useless if in these 3 days you are not doing, the correct things. For example, if you are creating damage for yourself in these 3 days, if you are creating damage to others, like asuras do, then it is useless or worse.
But also, Mataji, I guess if you have a 3-day retreat, but then for the other times of the year, you don't apply anything that you've gained in that retreat or anything that you've learned in that retreat.
Then you can say it's useless because you go to school and you study the stuff and then you never use what you have learned. So okay,
yes.
Yes.
And Mataji, I think this has been such an important point, what you've said, because people think the purpose of fasting, don't laugh when I think, it's to go hungry, you're doing some form of hardship and that's pleasing God.
Nah,
whereas
that's typically Abrahamic. That's Abrahamic.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Whereas what you're saying is the time that you're spent not cooking, not preparing food, not worrying about your food, that time, the energy changes because you're not spending that time worrying about those things. So you're being closer to what you want to do during that period. That's the purpose of tapasya, isn't it, Mataji? I guess, isn't it?
That's why we have the vratas, like the Kadashi Vrata, the Shivaratri Vrata, the Navaratri Vrata, the Masami Vrata, whatever Vrata, that is the time. We can call it spiritual retreat. We just give up the other stuff and then we focus on the spiritual consciousness. But the point is that if a spiritual retreat, you're getting massage, Ayurvedic massage, that's not spiritual, that's the body. Okay, that's a health retreat.
Yes, absolutely.
It's good for health, but it's not spiritual.
Absolutely. And you've covered in these last 5 minutes, there's some there's been some real pearls come out here, particularly in relation to that. And what you've done is that you've connected a retreat, the so-called retreat, to what it truly is. Even Ekadashi is a retreat of sorts. Because,
should be.
Yes.
But unfortunately, because our calendar in the globalized culture, it doesn't respect these vratas. So we still have to go to work.
Yes.
We still have to run up and down. We still have to, do a lot of things. We cannot really focus much. It would be better because in the Vedic society, in Vedic times, in Vedic society, on these days, everybody was doing chutti. Doing, start working, everybody would just focus, women as well. Because the fasting thing is mostly to give women the opportunity to, do something else, focus on spirituality rather than doing all the cooking and, cleaning and all the stuff.
Mataji, I think that's been incredibly useful. It's been a very, very productive discussion today, and I'd like to thank you so much for this. It's been incredibly useful.
Welcome.
I've learned loads, and I'd just like to sort of, show my appreciation to you, Mataji.
Thanks to you. Let's do it again.
Jai Shriman
Jai Shriman
Narayana.
Narayana. Jai Jagannath.
Jai.